Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we will discuss about secure synopsis of 17th of June 2021. Let us get started with the first topic. It is General Studies 1, and of that we'll be having a question on industrial revolution. Industrialization was actually a mixed blessing. Explain by giving examples. Let's have a look at the answer to this question. How is it a mixed blessing and why is it not a blessing of its own? Industrialization is the development of industries in a region or a country on a wide scale. It is also the period of economic and social change that transforms human society from agrarian tendencies into one that has purpose of manufacturing. When the incomes of workers rise, then the markets for different consumer goods and services expands. That results in a further stimulus to economic growth and industrial investment. The first steps towards industrialization took place in the middle of the 18th century. The initial focus was on specific areas of North America and Europe, with Great Britain leading the way into this new economy. Its initial characteristics included shifts from rural area, technological progress, and changes in class consciousness. Advantages of industrialization. Industrialization brought the current export import market setup. Businesses formed from industrialization have a more abundant supply available for particular goods and services. When domestic demands were not enough to help optimize production levels, multinational firms began forming. Countries could expand their import and export markets for the goods getting made. The role of multinational companies in today's world is product of industrialization. Industrialization makes goods and services more affordable. Labor is the most expensive part of the manufacturing process for most industries. When people were creating items by hand, including books and clothing, then they needed to be compensated for their efforts. With machines helping humans to create products with greater speed, then the cost of labor per unit went down. Quality of life for each person and household improved. Before the world experienced industrialization, comfort and convenience were typically reserved for the wealthy, nobles, military leaders, and high ranking politicians. The introduction of mass production changed how everyone could access goods or services. It was a change that led to mass production of numerous items, lower cost, and improved availability to the average family. This event would lead to the first time in history when the poor or middle class could save money while still meeting their needs. Anyone could own property without needing to be a farmer or a royal. One didn't need to grow your own food through homesteading efforts. Industrialization created more jobs for the global economy. New manufacturing equipment required additional employment opportunities in each community. Factories that had higher quotas to meet needed new workers on the floor working to produce goods. Each new invention or best practice that came about because of industrialization led to more jobs for the global economy. It created structures where the average person could earn a decent living while having more time with their family, even if the conditions were sometimes unsafe or unsanitary. When the workers with higher wages could invest their savings into new ventures, each economy benefited because new cash pools helped to fund new ventures. It shifted money away from the aristocracy to the average household. It shifted our perspective of wants versus needs. When people made products before industrialization, the labor required to create something meant that each item required a specific purpose. We made things because of their usefulness, which limited our innovation. Factories could make nothing faster while helping it to last longer. It allowed people to step outside of the family business to try something new. This advantage would eventually lead to a stronger free market economy where those with the most innovation could get rewarded for their creativity. Example searching for more factories promoted imperialism. Disadvantages of industrialization. Working conditions declined during the industrialization. Industrialization brought people more money and better access to goods and services, but it also increased the amount of risk that people faced. Employees were expected to put in long shifts, often working 12 hours a day with only Sunday off to spend time with their families. If you were sick or got injured, then you would probably get fired. Industrialization created more income inequality that promoted widespread poverty and hunger. Top 5% of individuals amassed 90% of the wealth. If promoted global warming and climate change, carbon levels before the 19th century were under 300 parts per million. After industrialization, carbon dioxide rates rose to 400 parts per million. Oceans have a more acidic pH level. We have plastics pollution everywhere with microplastics entering the human food chain because animals consume these small items. This disadvantage has led to changes in our soil composition, water quality, and the air that we breathe. It's reducing biodiversity while our economies grow. Unless action gets taken to curb this issue, we will one day reach a tipping point where a recovery might not be possible. Industrialization altered the political landscape of the planet. We still experience the fallout from industrialization in our global politics. Fewer than 40 countries have gone through a modern economic revolution to fully incorporate these technologies, giving those that have a massive advantage over the developing world. There are more opportunities for success in these countries, requiring people who want an advanced education to leave their homes to receive it. Alteration of map of Africa as per whims and fancies of Europeans. Living conditions around the new factories were worse. For instance, Jharkhand coal mines, although was rich in minerals, it was degraded. It had degraded the quality of life of individuals surrounding there. Industrialization changed our world for the better in many ways. It is up to us to keep it clean from the pollution that comes about as side effect to these efforts. If we are unwilling to approach our environment in the same way that we look at our economies, then this planet we have may not be around much longer. Salient features of Indian society, diversity of India, issues relating to poverty and hunger. Discuss how child marriages in India lead to an intergenerational cycle of poverty. Also suggest some measures to curb this menace. Child marriage usually refers to a social phenomenon practiced in some societies in India where a young child, usually a girl below the age of 15, is married to an adult man. A second form of practice of child marriage is that in which the parents of two children arrange a future marriage. In this practice, the individuals do not meet one another until they reach the marriageable age when the wedding ceremony is performed. Recent analysis by UNICEF points out that 1 in 3 of the world's child brides live in India. It has also warned India against the increase in child marriages owing to the adversaries of COVID 19. To achieve the commitment of ending child marriages by 2030, it becomes important to integrate the COVID 19 responses with child marriage elimination efforts. The factors that encourage its subsistence are usually a combination of poverty, the lack of education, continued perpetration of patriarchal relations that encourage and facilitate gender inequalities, and cultural perspectives that encourage the phenomenon to thrive. Continued prevalence of child marriage in India. Lack of education, a big determinant of the age of marriage is education. Around 45% of women with no education and 40% with primary education married before the age of 18, which was given in the NFHS, that is National Family Health Survey 4. Seen as a burden, economically, child marriages work as mechanisms that are quick income earners. A girl child is seen as a leeway to a large dowry to be given to her family upon her marriage. Poverty in terms of economic status, women from poor households tend to marry earlier. While more than 30% of women from the lowest two wealth quintiles were married by the age of 18, the corresponding figure in the richest quintile was 8%. Social background, child marriages are more prevalent in rural areas and among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Trafficking, poor families are tempted to sell their girls not just into marriage but into prostitution, as the transaction enables large sums of money to benefit the girl's family and harms the girl. There is apathy towards their girls, and the money by selling their girls is used for the benefit of their sons. Girls are often seen as a liability with limited economic role. Women's work is confined to the household and is not valued. In addition, there is the problem of dowry. Despite the fact that dowry has been prohibited for 5 decades, Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, it is still common for parents of girls to in India to give gifts to the groom or his family either in cash or kind. The dowry amount increases with the age and education level of the girl, hence, the incentive of the system of dowry perpetuates child marriage. The families and girls who might benefit from social protection programs are not always aware of them, and these schemes are often limited to providing cash transfers without the accompanying messages to address the multidimensional nature of child marriage. Interlinkages of poverty and child marriages in India. Madhya Pradesh recorded 46 child marriages between November 2019 and March 2020, a figure that had jumped to 117 in just 3 months of the lockdown from April to June 2020, data provided by Childline India. According to Childline India, across India, 5,214 child marriages were reported in the first 4 months after lockdown between March to June. UNICEF has said that in Madhya Pradesh, where child marriages are a constant challenge, economic pressures due to the pandemic has pushed poor parents to marry off girls early. What are the facts and figures about the prevalence of child marriage in India? Child marriage is widespread across India, with nearly half of brides married as girls. While there has been a decline in the incidence of child marriage nationally, about 54% in 1992 to 1993 to 33% today, and in nearly all states, the pace of change remains slow, especially for girls in the age group of 15 to 18 years. Child marriage is more prevalent in rural areas, 48%, than in urban areas, 29%. There are also variations across different groups, particularly excluded communities, castes, and tribes, although some ethnic groups, such as tribal groups, have lower rates of child marriage compared with the majority population. Drop out of school, have a low paid job, and limited decision making power at home. A girl with 10 years of education has a 6 times lower chance of being pushed into marriage before she is 18. 40% of the world's 60 million child marriages take place in India, according to the National Family Health Survey. India has the 14th highest rate of child marriage in the world, according to the International Center for Research on Women. And here we have a map of India where it speaks about 1 in 2 women aged 20 to 24 years in 6 states continue to get married before legal age of marriage. So lowest Himachal Pradesh at 9.1% and its highest in Bihar, which is at 68.2%. Measures to prevent child marriages. Education is one of the most effective strategies to protect children against marriage. When girls are able to stay in school, an attitudinal change can also occur towards their opportunities within the community. Gender sensitization programs, gender training programs should be spread throughout the district for police and NGOs. Primary and secondary education for girls should be promoted. Government of India, along with organizations like UNICEF and NGOs, should make the efforts for the implementation of the convergent national strategy, which includes law enforcement, capacity building on laws, support mechanisms such as child marriage telephone hotline, Odisha Child Marriage as Assistance Forum, girls empowerment, imparting life skills, protection skills, higher education and employment opportunities, etc. Community mobilization, working with influential leaders, oaths and pledges, counseling, folk and traditional media, government's partnerships with civil society organizations and communities are key to supporting community mobilization efforts, and mindset changes and partnerships with the media are very important for raising awareness of child marriage. Promoting convergence of sectors at all levels, in particular with education and social protection schemes and programs. Government of India has already enacted laws like Child Marriage Prohibition Act of 2006 and started many initiatives like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, etc. to incentivize the people to give equal treatment to their daughters as their sons. The Government of India is also implementing national programs aimed at protecting and promoting the development of children, while states are supporting these initiatives through state level schemes. However, many of the programs focus on addressing financial vulnerability through cash transfer schemes to keep girls in school. The government's efforts should go beyond the financial solution and should also focus on changing mindset, creating awareness, etc. Conditional cash transfer schemes addresses issues more towards the individual rather than the household, which is the focus of the government. Certain national schemes is related to maternity benefits and the survival and education of the girl child, which addresses the problem of child marriage directly or indirectly. Example: Dhanalakshmi, Rajiv Gandhi's scheme for empowerment of adolescent girls, etc. CCTVs have benefits of legal protection of the marriage as well as ensuring education of girls. Government of India has the biggest responsibility towards ensuring better childhood of every child. Every child, irrespective of socio-economic status, is entitled to the quality education, health facilities, and freedom and space to enjoy childhood. General studies too. The topic here would be about the social sector services. And the question here is: the COVID 19 vaccination drive demonstrates that India has become Atmanirbhar in vaccination against infectious disease. Elucidate. So, India began the world's largest vaccination program on Jan 16, 2021. The Prime Minister of India said that India is entering a decisive phase of vaccination in the fight against the COVID 19 with the approval of two made in India COVID 19 vaccines. The PM has also said that the two vaccines are most cost effective than any other in the world, and that India's vaccine production and delivery capacity will be used to help all humanity in fighting this crisis. Now, what are the major features here? It is India's first ever adult vaccination drive. The Drug Controller General of India has granted the emergency use approval for two indigenous vaccines: Covishield by Serum Institute of India and Covaxin by Bharat Biotech. The two vaccines are found to be safe and no major side effects are expected. However, little pain or redness in the skin can be observed. The vaccines have gone through the preclinical animal experiments on animals, like rabbits, mice, and hamsters, followed by non human primates. Out of the two vaccines, Covaxin is an inactivated vaccine, whereas Covishield is a live vaccine. In the first vaccination drive, the first 3 crore people to be vaccinated included the healthcare workers and frontline workers. The cost of vaccination of these people will be borne by the government. India and other vaccines are at present 80% of the world's whole measles vaccine is provided by India. India supplies all the rubella vaccines to South America. The indigenous developed meningococcal vaccine of India is applied to the entire sub-Saharan Africa. Meningococcal meningitis caused by the Neisseria meningitidis bacteria. It is a serious infection of the thin lining that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. The indigenous rotavirus vaccines going to 16 countries in the world. Various novel covaccines have been introduced by India, such as the world's first subunit rabies vaccine. It has been approved by the Drug Controller General of India. Subunit vaccines are composed of protein or glycoprotein components of a pathogen that are capable of introducing a protective immune response and may be produced by conventional biochemical or recombinant DNA technologies. Government strategies for smooth and effective drive preparatory measures. The key preparatory aspects that have been undertaken include the physical infrastructure, human resources, and training of the vaccinators. The digital aspect, the government has launched the COVID application for the registration of the citizens and to generate digital certificates of vaccination. Community participation, besides preparatory aspects, the community participation has also been emphasized by the Prime Minister. He has urged all to come forward and help in eliminating vaccine hesitancy. Beneficiary identification, separate templates have been developed for the healthcare workers and the frontline workers. People above the age of 50 who have comorbidities will be the next to be vaccinated. Aadhaar will also be used for beneficiary identification. Steps that need to be taken are spreading awareness, effective collaboration, between the state, center, state, and communities and healthcare workers, proper training of vaccinators, and also maintaining it at the temperatures of vaccines, monitoring, keeping watch of any side effects. Now, what are the challenges? Vaccine hesitancy is one of the biggest challenge, and because it obstructs the smooth implementation of the vaccine drive. There people are hesitant about getting vaccinated and it will not create a good impact among common people as they are the role model for the people who will be vaccinated next. There is uncertainty and suspicion about the side effects of the vaccine, issues with the COVID app, connectivity issues and internet problems, lack of experience. The COVID 19 vaccination drive is India's first ever large scale immunization program. We have done polio vaccination, but this type of vaccination is for the first time. Vaccine wastage is high, and because each vaccine vial contains about 10 doses and must be used within 4 hours of opening. What's the way forward? Eliminating vaccine hesitancy. The COVID 19 vaccines for adults, the communication is required in order to resolve the confusions and to eliminate vaccine hesitancy. Jan Bhagyatari, there should be community participation, and people should take vaccine and spread the word about efficacy and security of the vaccine. To continue the flow of vaccines, taking lessons from the countries, India should continue flow of vaccines. US got stalled because they started to store the second doses of vaccines too. Vaccination, COVID appropriate behavior needs to be maintained. Right now, a lot of people are going to Manali and Leh Ladakh, and they have to stop it as soon as possible. Now, what's the conclusion? India has now emerged as a global COVID vaccine hub, which has done not only by manufacturing or developing vaccines, but also ensuring how it will be transported and how the entire vaccination drive has to be done. For the world's largest vaccination against COVID 19, a multi pronged approach is required, including educating people, following the vaccination process, keeping a check on new strains of virus, maintaining the records of essential data of the beneficiaries, and refining our strategy. Vaccine hesitancy is the main obstruction in the smooth vaccination drive. In order to defeat the pandemic, vaccine hesitancy should be eliminated first, as it is not the vaccine but vaccination that prevents an infection. So, Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth and development and employment. Discuss the issues associated with global minimum tax and how it matters to India in the changing digital landscape where data is the new oil. So, global minimum corporate tax is a type of corporate tax. Under this, if a company moves some of its operations to another country having low tax jurisdiction, then the company has to pay the difference between the minimum rate and whatever the firm paid on its earnings, overseas earnings. Overall, it is estimated that corporate tax avoidance costs countries around the world $300 to $500 billion in lost revenues each year. Recently, the finance ministers from the group of 7 nations reached a landmark accord setting a global minimum corporate tax rate. Now, what's the landmark deal? G7 would back a minimum global corporation tax rate of at least 15% and put in place measures to ensure taxes were paid in the countries where businesses operate. It would apply to companies' overseas profits. Therefore, if countries agree on a global minimum, governments could still set whatever local corporate tax rate they want. But if companies pay lower rates in a particular country, their home governments could top up their taxes to the agreed minimum rate, eliminating the advantage of shifting profits to a tax haven. Impact on India: tax avoidance will continue to remain a troubling issue for the global economy. It will further be problematic to enforce such a policy in a federal government structured country like India. A lower tax rate is a tool for India to alternatively push economic activity. If the proposal comes into effect, India may experience a longer economic hangover than other developed nations with less ability to offer mega stimulus packages. Multilateralism will further stumble in such a tax policy. The policy will create haves and have nots across the world. While taxation is ultimately a sovereign function and depends upon the needs and circumstances of the nation, the governments should be open to participate and engage in the emerging discussions globally around the corporate tax structure. To address the challenges posed by the enterprise who conduct their business through digital means and carry out activities in the country remotely, the government has the equalization levy introduced in 2016 following a recommendation by a panel constituted to deliberate on taxation of the digital economy. Also, the IT Act has been amended to bring in the concept of significant economic presence for establishing business connection in the case of non residents in India. India has already been proactively engaging with foreign governments in double taxation avoidance agreements, tax information exchange agreements, and multilateral conventions to plug loopholes. Thus, proposal of a common tax rate thereby adds no further benefits to India. India's stand with the largest user base for Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube, which is monetized handsomely by these platforms. India will not be adequately compensated by the above two steps. With around 45% of a total population of 1.3 billion being digitally connected and more people kind of getting connected, these tech companies are bound to benefit further. India has already been proactively engaging with foreign governments to end double taxation avoidance agreements, tax information exchange agreements, and multilateral conventions to plug loopholes. This proposal of a common tax rate thereby adds no further benefits to India. A lower tax rate is a tool for India to alternatively push economic activity. If the proposal comes into effect, India may experience a longer economic hangover than other developed nations with less ability to offer mega stimulus packages. Multilateralism will further stumble in such a tax policy. The policy will create haves and have nots across the world. Now, what's the way forward? At the same time, the government must also pass the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019 quickly so that provisions for data localization requiring Indian data to be stored and processed in the country are in place. This could be the ideal way to force tech firms to correctly evaluate the revenue generated from our sovereign data and thus tax it. Till that is achieved or a consensus arrived at, the government must ensure that the DST will fill the gap as an economic rent against the use of Indian data. What's the conclusion? Multinationals are a source of foreign direct investment. These corporations help to generate demand with efficient utilization of resources and create employment in low income countries. Nations have used their freedom to set corporation tax rates as a way to attract such businesses. Smaller countries such as Ireland, Netherlands, and Singapore have attracted footloose businesses by offering low corporate tax rates. The global minimum tax rate will finish off every opportunity for such countries whose only weapon to attract these companies is lower taxes. In a world where there are income inequalities across geographies, a minimum global corporation tax rate could crowd out investment opportunities. Government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation, security challenges and their management in border areas, linkages of organized crime with terrorism. Unlawful Activities Act of 1967 is India's primary legal armament against terrorism. But its application has run into controversies on the grounds of breach of fundamental rights critically analyze. The Unlawful Activities Prevention Amendment Bill is an anti terror legislation that seeks to designate an individual as a terrorist. There has been a sharp surge in the state's use of this provision in a sweeping range of alleged offenses against tribals in Chhattisgarh, those using social media through proxy service in Jammu and Kashmir, the journalists in Manipur, among others. According to data provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs in Parliament in March, a total of 1,126 cases were registered under UAPA in 2019, a sharp rise from 897 in 2015. By ruling that terrorist activity cannot be broadly defined to include ordinary penal actions, offences, the three Delhi High Court orders granting bail recently to three student activists. Now, what are the key features of the UPA Act? It empowers the government to designate individuals as terrorists if the person commits or participates in acts of terrorism, prepares for terrorism, promotes terrorism, or is otherwise involved in terrorism. This has been done as it is seen that when a terrorist organization is banned, its members form a new organization to spread terrorism. The bill also empowers the Director General of the National Investigation Agency to grant approval of seizure or attachment of property when the case is being investigated by the agency. Under the existing Act, the investigation officer is required to obtain the prior approval of the Director General Police to seize properties that bear any connection to terrorism. It has been seen that many times a terror accused own properties in different states. In such cases, seeking approval of DGPs of different states becomes very difficult, and the delay caused by the same may enable the accused to transfer properties. It empowers the officers of the NIA of the rank of inspector or above to investigate cases. The existing Act provides for investigation of cases to be conducted by officers of the rank of Deputy Superintendent or Assistant Commissioner of Police or above. No changes being made in arrest or bail provisions. Also, the provision that the burden of proof is on the investigating agency and not on the accused has not been changed. The International Convention for Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism 2005 has also been added in the second schedule through the amendment. Now, what's the impact on fundamental rights? It allows the central government to name an individual as a terrorist if it believes without any formal judicial process which is against the principles of natural justice. The name of such a person will be included in the fourth schedule proposed to be added in the Parent Act. The only statutory remedy available to such a person is to make an application before the central government for denotification, which will be considered by a review committee constituted by the government itself. An official designation as a terrorist will be akin to civil death for a person, with social boycott, expulsion from job, hounding by media, and perhaps attack from self-proclaimed vigilant groups following. The amendment poses threat to different viewpoints and goes against the freedom of speech and expression of an individual. The law could target minorities or a section of people, thereby affecting their cultural rights. Provisions of the UPA have an extremely wide ambit, which makes it possible to use them against not just criminals and terrorists, but even authors, academics, lawyers for alleged terrorists, and human rights activists. Indefinite imprisonment without trial. Even if the person is eventually acquitted of the charges, the delays in conducting judicial proceedings mean the case may only get heard several years after their arrest. Failure to get bail means they have to spend the entire time in jail. The Act also interferes with the privacy and liberty of individuals, contravening the provisions which protect against arbitrary or unlawful interference with a person's privacy and home. The Act allows for searches, seizures, and arrests based on the personal knowledge of the police officers without a written validation from a superior judicial authority. Liberty versus national security. This law is aimed at effective prevention of unlawful activities associations in India. Its main objective is to make powers available for dealing with activities directed against the integrity and sovereignty of India. But there must be a distinction between an individual and an organization. It must be kept in mind that the Constitution guarantees the former the right to life and liberty. Benjamin Franklin said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Now, what's the way forward? There is a need to undertake structural changes to provide transparency in the proceedings to make UOPA Act more accountable. Proper justification must be provided for the seizure of the properties and assets of an individual. The bill must ensure judicial solutions to the wrongly accused to safeguard the individual's dignity, freedom, and equality in the society. The government must also rethink regarding the issues pertaining to the rights of life and liberty and to federalism. Now, what's the conclusion? In civilized nations from whom India has taken its constitution and its laws, the criminal justice system is about the rights of the accused. That is also the foundation of our justice system. The very idea of the UPA and the decision to start naming people terrorists without securing a conviction from a court of law goes against the principles of natural justice. General Studies for Ethics. The idea of Civil Services Board has been widely hailed as a key civil services reform. However, it is not without its own limitation. Comment. To insulate the bureaucracy from political interference and to put an end to frequent transfers of civil servants by political bosses, the Supreme Court had in 2013 directed the center and the states to set up the Civil Services Board. As per the rules, all states should have a Civil Services Board. Civil Services Board is responsible for the entry-level recruitment and subsequent job promotions below the rank of Joint Secretary. As per a state government notification dated June 2, CSB will be headed by the Chief Secretary, the Personal Secretary, and either Financial Commissioner or Home Secretary. The board provides for the state to follow the center's guidelines on giving a fixed tenure of at least 2 years for cadre officers. They cannot be transferred before that, and if anyone recommends their transfer, then the board will examine and effect it. The final authority is the Chief Minister at state and Prime Minister at center. Benefits will be able to provide better administration to the PA officials, feel safe and try to stick to the rules, better delivery and stable tenure to people. Issues involved may create a functional and administrative problems, less answerable and accountable to legislators, overstep the authority and jurisdiction of the state government. With the fixed tenure rule, the political executives feel their influence has been reduced to nothing, and bureaucrats feel that the urge to go to courts for effective implementation of guidelines in letter and spirit. Example, Haryana had the CSB in place, but the guidelines are not followed. A healthy working relationship between ministers, MLAs, civil servants is critical for good governance. Therefore, the state needs to take every stakeholder of governance into confidence. State can learn from the loopholes of other states in implementing the fixed tenure rule. What are the issues relating to a citizens charter as an effective tool for holding public servants accountable? How can these issues be addressed? Explain. A citizens charter represents the commitment of the organization towards standard quality and time frame of service delivery, grievance redress mechanism, transparency and accountability. The concept of citizens charter enshrines the trust between the service provider and its users. Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances in Government of India initiated the task of coordinating, formulating and operationalizing citizens charters. Now, one size fits all is some of the problems that are faced in Citizens Charter. CCs have still not been able to be adopted by all ministers and departments. Silo operations devoid of participative mechanisms, in a majority of cases not formulated through a consultative process with cutting edge staff who will finally implement it. It's non dynamic, charters are rarely updated, making it a one time exercise frozen in time, poor design on content, lack of meaningful and succinct CCs, absence of critical information that end users need to hold agencies accountable, lack of public awareness. Only a small percentage of end users is aware of the commitments made in the CC, since effective efforts of communicating and educating the public about the standards of delivery promise. Measurable standards of delivery are rarely defined, and there is poor adherence. Now, what's the way forward? Wide consultation process needs to be put in place. There should be a participatory process. Firm commitments needs to be made. A redressal mechanism has to be put in place. One size fits all does not fit here. Periodic updation of the citizens charter, and there should be a responsibility fixed on the officers and hold accountable of them. Citizens charter is playing a prominent role in ensuring minimum government and maximum governance, changing the nature of charters from non-justiciable to justiciable, and adopting penalty measures that will make it more efficient and citizen friendly. The Sevoton model proposed by Second Administrative Reforms Commission for Public Service Delivery can be regarded as a standard model for providing services and citizen-centric governance.